Hello and welcome to Talkin' Tunes. I am your host, Frank Walsh. We have a very special edition today because as you can see, I am not in the studio. I am sitting in the parlor of the music room in West Yarmouth down on the Cape. And I have a gentleman here who really needs no introduction. He is a man who has been on the music scene locally, nationally, and internationally for many, many years. And he has accumulated a lot of stories, many of which you're going to hear today. But you are also going to be able to read about them because he has written a book, which we're going to get into pretty deeply. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the harmonica master, Mr. Jerry Portnoy. Jerry, thank you so much for being here today and doing this.
Thanks
I
for
really
having me.
appreciate it. So you have a book coming out, and I'm sure
do.
that book is going to cover a lot of stories. But before we get into the book, why don't we roll back the clock a little bit, and for those one or two people out there who may not know some of your background, why don't you kind of fill in some of the gaps and talk about how you get into music and how you kind of followed the path that you followed.
Well, it is kind of a twisting story, but really, I was exposed to the blues as a child.
Mm-hmm. Oh, in Chicago, right?
In Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, and my father had a store in a very famous area of Chicago that was known for blues, the Maxwell Street Market. He had a store right on Maxwell Street, right near the hub of the whole area near Maxwell and Halstead. And this is the late 1940s and early 50s, and I was down there probably every Sunday, which was the big day down there, every Sunday probably from 1947 maybe to 1953.
Wow.
In 1953, they were building an expressway, and the city was running an expressway right through the section of Maxwell Street that my father's store was on.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to sell out under the law of eminent domain. But what happened at that time in the late 40s, there was a huge wave of black people moving up from Mississippi, from the Delta, really probably started maybe in the early 40s, late 30s or something, but it was really ramped up in 1944 when they introduced the mechanical cotton picker.
Oh, okay.
And one machine, then so the people that owned the plantations down there, cotton plantations, one machine could do the work of 50 field hands. So that pretty much ended the sharecropper system. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the black people came out of the cotton fields and went north because not only were they out of work from the end of the sharecropper system, but there were more, the war was going on, and there were a lot of jobs in the industrial north. And Chicago, of course, was a big rail hub, and they had the enormous Chicago stockyards, so there was work, and they could get out from picking cotton and living under the heel of Jim Crow. So what would happen, they came out of the South, and Chicago was like the promised land. So they would come up and they would play on the street in the Maxwell Street Market. And that's where I first heard the blues as a kid.
Were they playing harmonica, guitars?
Yeah, Little Walter played right down the street from my father's store.
Really? I was going to ask you if any of these people were prominent people. You just
Oh,
dropped
yeah.
Little Walter
Oh, yeah.
and
Well,
rattle off some of those other
my
people who might have been
father's
playing
store,
around there.
my father's store was at 630 Maxwell now. There was a place called Maxwell Record and Radio. I think it was at 831 Maxwell, I believe, yeah. And it was a radio store. I'd go in there as a kid, and I remember all the bins with tubes and radio knobs, and they had glossy pictures of all the musicians on the walls. And they actually cut two records right after the war. They're considered really the first post-war blues records. And they had a label called R&L Records. And the first record they put out was Johnny Young, a tune called Money Taken Woman. And the other one was Lil Walter, I Just Keep Loving Her, which was the flip side of another song with Otham Brown, who was this guitar player. But Johnny Young and Lil Walter made these records, and of course, Johnny Young and Lil Walter were both pretty important in my life.
You still have any of those records?
No, actually, years
did.
later, I mean, they cut those records in '47, and I went down there in 1971 with my pal Rick Estrin, and we bought a couple, we each bought a couple copies of Just Keep Loving Her. Because they still had the original 78s and the little paper sleeves down there, but, you know, 78s were brittle and
Yeah, they break.
I mean, I wish I had taken better care of them because they're long gone. They got broken, you know, over time, but they'd be worth, you know,
forever,
huge money
big
today.
bucks.
Yeah.
When did you get the bug to say, you know, you've seen all this music, you were exposed to all of this music, you probably saw multi-instruments, you probably saw harmonica, guitar, you probably saw it all. When did you get the urge to play, and why did you choose the harmonica?
Well, in 1968, after a tragic love affair,
No.
not so tragic, but at any rate, I was living out in San Francisco at the time. This was 1967. Yes, I went out there in '67. At any rate, I decided to take off for Europe, and I was over at a friend's house just before I left, and it was just like this, he had a harmonica sitting up on his mantelpiece. And I went over and I picked it up and I blew through it a couple times, and I immediately felt that I could make sense of it.
Connected?
I had tried other instruments. I tried playing guitar and piano, and everything required some kind of digital dexterity. You know, you had to be coordinated, facile with your hands or whatever. Anyway, the harmonica was a strictly oral instrument. You stick it in your mouth, no hands, no coordination, breathe in, breathe out. I figured low notes here, high notes here, breathe in, breathe out. I can figure this out.
You make it sound like a lazy man's instrument.
Yeah, well, lazy is my middle name. So
Maybe laid back. I don't know about lazy. I'd say laid back.
But you know, as I say in the book, I seemed to be kind of oral. I had to be stuffing something in my pie hole, or smoking a cigarette, or kissing my girlfriend, or yakking, or something with the mouth. So I felt a physical affinity for the harmonica. And my friend, this was just before I was taking off for Europe, my friend who had the harmonica, he said, take it with you when you go. So I took it with me, and I was in Europe about 6 months, and I was fooling around. You know, I'd fool around playing little tunes I could hear in my head.
No formal lessons?
No,
Nothing like
no.
that? Just learning,
And then I was in Sweden. I was staying at this hippie crash pad in Sweden, and in a town called Uppsala, which was a college town. And I wandered downtown and walked into a record store, and I found this record by Sonny Boy Williamson, Rice Miller, the second Sonny Boy, and there were stars on it, and he was pictured in profile with a harmonica going down his mouth like that.
Wow.
And I bought the record, and I brought it back to the crash pad I was staying at, and they had a record player. And before I dropped the record on the turntable, I dropped some acid. And then I dropped the record on the turntable, and
Magic?
everything changed.
Magic.
Everything. From that, as soon as I heard that record, I was completely obsessed. I only cared about one thing, was getting to the bottom of how to do that. And from that moment, I was laser focused on learning how to do that. And the first order of business was getting back to the United States.
Now, how easy or difficult was that? Did it come easy for you, or was it a struggle for you to to pick that up and to learn how to play and
Well, you learn like most musicians.
trial and error?
Yeah, yeah. You buy records, you listen to the records, you try and duplicate what you can, and then of course, you try and go out and hear people play live.
Yeah. But I've talked to people who were guitarists who wanted to play the guitar and they'd pick up the guitar and they just couldn't do it and they'd switch to another instrument. It just didn't work for them. But it obviously worked for you.
Well, yeah, the harmonica was for me. I tried other instruments before, and
It just didn't work for you,
no,
right? Yeah.
no, I was not
Cool.
meant to be a harmonica guitar player or an accordion player or a piano player or all these other things that I failed miserably at.
Okay. Now, where did the service come in? I know that you were a service, you're a veteran. Where did that come in? Was that during the time you were learning to play, in the middle? What was that sequence when you were playing that? I'm sure you were probably a teenager. And, when did the service kick in, and how did that affect your career or your path?
Well, I was drafted in April of 1965. Prior to that, I was running the biggest pool room in Chicago.
Wow.
And
See Minnesota Fats down there at all?
I knew Fats.
You knew the
I
Fats?
knew Cornbread Red.
Eddie Felson,
Daddy
do you know those
Warbeck.
guys?
Well, Eddie Felson is a
Fictional character.
fictional character. I knew Eddie Robin, who was a real character and a real
Wow.
pool hustler.
Wow.
But at any rate, yeah, while I was working at the pool hall, I got drafted in April of '65, and I had an interesting military career.
Should I ask what does interesting mean? Or?
Well, I was a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne Division. Vietnam was starting to heat up, and I could see that I was headed for big trouble. So I had to figure out a way to avoid seeing Vietnam. And I investigated some Army regulations and figured out a way to protect myself.
Okay.
And they can read about it in the book.
Okay, that's good.
It's quite an interesting story.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. What page is that on?
That I don't remember.
That's interesting. Okay. So let's say, we'll leave that for the book, but let's say you get out of there, and then when did your career start to take off? When did Jerry Portnoy become Jerry Portnoy, where you said, you know what, I'm pretty damn good. I'm going to make a career out of this, and I'm going to move forward. When did that happen? How old were you? And talk about that.
Well, first of all, I picked up the harmonica. I was almost 25. I was 24 when I think, just before I was 25, I picked up the harmonica.
25? I thought it was earlier than that. No? Okay. Go ahead.
I was 24. I hadn't turned 25. And like I said, that was just before I went to Europe. So I went to Europe. I found that Sonny Boy Williamson record. I went crazy for it. I came back to the States. I stopped in Chicago briefly, but I went back out to California, where I'd been living in San Francisco. And that's when I started to, get into the scene and learn some stuff. And the first great harmonica player I met was Sonny Terry.
Okay, yeah.
Now, he's one of the all-time greats,
Yep.
Though he plays in what they call a Piedmont style. I play nothing like Sonny, but I got very close to him and Brown and McGee. I knew them both very well.
Yep.
I was very close to Sonny, and I do tell this story in the book. He was playing at a club in Berkeley called Mandrakes on University Avenue, and he would stay at a motel a couple blocks down the street. And I would go over to his motel and lead him to the gig because he was legally blind.
Okay.
He could see a bit of light and shadow. But I would lead him to the gig, and one time we're walking down University Avenue towards the club, and he had this shirt, a multi-pocketed shirt. He had all these little pockets in it with all his harps in it,
Wow.
with all the different keys, and he knew where every key was.
Mm-hmm.
So we're walking down the street, he's holding on to my arm, and he pulls a harp out of his shirt, and he holds it up, and he says, "Jerry," he says, this harp taking me all over the world. He said, if you stick with it, it'll do the same for you.
Interesting.
And like I say in the book, I said those words were the fuel of dreams. And
Did he give you that guitar? Did he give
No,
you
no,
that
he-
harmonica?
he-
No,
no,
he just
no,
showed it to you.
no. But he just said, stick with this.
There's your ticket,
and
right.
That's your ticket, yeah. And he turned out to be right. You know, and it was very gratifying. Many years later, we did a show together, and he was really.
Where'd you get your first break? When you got your break, when someone said, "Hey, you know, let's play," you know, join my band, or you started your own band, you know.
Well,
Where
I
did
was.
you get that first break?
Well, I was living in San Francisco, and then my dad got sick in 1970. So I went back to Chicago, and that's when it really started to heat up. I mean, I was learning and practicing. I'd go over to Big Walter's house. You know, I'd be at Teresa's listening to Junior Wells and just all.
So there were a lot of clubs there. There were a lot of blues clubs. There were places
There were
everywhere,
clubs
right?
everywhere on the south side, the north side, the west side, and you could go out and hear everybody was still. I mean, Walter was dead by that time. He died a couple of years earlier in '68, and Sonny Boy was gone. But outside of that, and Elmore James was gone, as far as some of the all-time greats. But Muddy was around. Howlin' Wolf was around. Freddie King, Willie Maybon, Smokey Smothers, Sunnyland Slim, just.
Nobody likes a name
Otis
dropper, Jerry.
Rush.
Come on, nobody likes a name dropper here.
Yeah. So I mean, everybody was there. I mean, it was an embarrassment of riches.
Now, did you look at any of those people that, of all those people whom you saw, you probably went to the different clubs. Is there anyone that you said, I want to play like him? That, I want to be like him?
Well, obviously, I was pretty close with Big Walter, and, Big Walter's sound was one of a kind. So,
Did you
I
try to
certainly
emulate
admired
him?
it.
Did you try to emulate him, or did you say, I want to play
Well,
like him?
in certain respects, I mean, a lot of people try and get close to his sound, but everybody has their own sound. Your physiognomy,
Right.
your lung capacity, your vocal cavity. Everybody is a little bit different, but his sound was deep. He had a very subtle, fast vibrato that made his notes glow.
Really? Okay.
And he had an extremely percussive attack, like a whip crack. So obviously, I would try and get close to his sound. You can't, duplicate somebody exactly. But for the most part, like everybody else, I was learning off the classic records. And I do tell this story in the book. One day I was driving a cab around Chicago, and I get in the back of a long hotel line, and actually when I finally get up to the front, I'd hope for a short ride so I could get back at the end of the cab line and practice some more, because I had a little tape recorder and a bunch of harps in the cab, and I just practiced till I got to the front of the line. At any rate, one night I was driving my cab around town, mostly just so I could drive to all the blues clubs, because I didn't have a car. So I went into the Wise Fools pub where Johnny Young was playing, and he had the Aces backing him.
That's all right.
Sorry about that. At any rate, the Aces were backing him, Louis Myers, Dave Myers, and Freddie Belo. And, of course, they played on many of Little Walter's classic records. And Big Walter was playing harp. And in the middle of one song, he just walks over to me and hands me his microphone. And I had some harps with me, so I fished out the right one, and I finished the number. And the band liked it, and they asked me to do another one.
Nice.
And Belo Bilo asked if I could play Off the Wall, which is a very famous instrumental number of Little Walters, a sophisticated number with a drum break in the middle of the song. And so I said yes, and I kicked it off, and I played it, and we went through the drum break. I played another couple choruses, and Bilo leaned over his drum kit, and he says, "Give me another drum break." And I was so locked into the way the song went. You know, I was just muscle memory.
Yeah, yeah.
I was afraid I'd lose my place or something like that, so I didn't give him the second break. But he came over to me afterwards, and Fred Bilo was a great guy. He said, "Oh, it was an honor to play with you." He says that to me, and I said, you know, it's a patently ridiculous statement. You know, I was a rookie. That was the first time I played in public, and I'm playing with, you know, some of the all-time greats who actually played on the original of Off the Wall. You know, and
Now, when you were doing all that, was any money hitting your pocket? Or
No,
was it
no,
just
no,
all
no.
experience?
That's
They
the first time-
They didn't slip you a buck or two here or there?
No.
Wow.
That's
okay.
the first time I was just, you know, trying to learn how to play. I was
Wow.
sitting in the club, and Walter hands me the mic, but what happened was that Johnny Young, whose gig that was and was playing on the gig, later on, he hired me to play with him in his band, and I stayed
Cool.
with Johnny Young for a couple of years. He was
Cool.
my first band leader. I was with him for a couple of years, and played around the Midwest, around Chicago and around the Midwest with him.
Cool. Now, you had mentioned earlier, you said they played Piedmont style, and you didn't play anything like him. And then the Chicago style. Talk about the different styles of music, and how would you, you know, talk about your style compared to some of the other ones that are out there?
Well, Sonny Terry's style, it's very chordal, a lot of big open chords, rhythmic chords, and of course he'd hoop and holler, and you know, he had all this fancy hand stuff.
Right, okay.
But the Chicago style is different. I mean, first of all, blues harmonica, I mean, outside of the Piedmont stuff, even Chicago blues harmonica is really, the foundation is John Lee Williamson, the first Sonny Boy.
Okay.
And a lot of harmonica players that come up now, you know, they try and start with Little Walter or something, which is like jumping the gun.
Okay.
It really all begins with John Lee Williamson. He's the foundation. And he kind of revolutionized the way the harmonica was played. He really kind of invented blues harmonica in a certain sense. But he still was kind of chord heavy, on the beat. And then after the Second World War, what happened was all the big bands, they had to cut down during the war because a lot of the musicians were drafted. There was gas rationing. You couldn't put a big band on the road like they used to have in the 30s.
Right, okay.
So all the bands were cut down. Even Count Basie got down, I think, 7 pieces. And there were these little jump bands, Joe and Jimmy Liggins and Amos Milburn. I mean, some of them were led by piano, but a lot of sax led by, especially Louis Jordan and the
Louis
Timpani
Jordan,
Five.
yeah.
So there were small combos led by saxophones. So here comes Little Walter, who was at the time playing like John Lee Williamson, like all the blues harmonica players did, and he played that style great. But he was a teenager, and he's listening to what's on the jukeboxes and the radios, which were these jump bands. So he started trying to play the harmonica almost more like a saxophone.
Okay.
It was more linear. He'd take long saxophone lines, and it was expressive. And when he was able to use amplification, I mean, it just created a whole different sound. And so his style, bears very little relation to something like Sonny Terry's style.
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming that you didn't have a lot of money back then. I'm assuming that, right?
That's a good assumption.
Okay, now, with that.
I don't know what's changed.
Okay, maybe after your book, you'll make a buck or two. But after, with that, you had mentioned before, one of the guys, he had all kinds of pockets with all kinds of harmonicas in there, right? How many harmonicas did you have? And if so, how did you get them? Because, each harmonica has its own tone, you have different, different songs required.
Well,
different
it's a fixed key instrument, so
were you able to develop with having, let's say, one or maybe two harmonicas?
No, if you're serious about it, you have to get them in all keys.
Yeah, how were you getting them? How were you?
I was buying them.
You really? Okay, so you were working your cab and, doing all of that and.
Yeah.
Cool,
So
okay.
I had, I had all the keys, and I'd
Good for you.
spend all day, listening to records and, learning my stuff.
Jump ahead a little bit. When did you start getting involved with with some of the big boys? We talk about Muddy. When you get involved with Muddy, was there anything in between what you were just saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, I played around.
Get into Muddy.
Well, I played around Chicago with all kinds of people.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a great blues scene in Chicago. There were clubs everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the greats were still alive and playing. Younger guys were coming up. So, like I said, I started with Johnny Young. I played in his band for a couple of years. We'd play, we'd play on the South Side. We'd play North Side clubs too, and we'd play around the Midwest. I played with played in a lot of gigs in Wisconsin, Racine and Manitowoc and Milwaukee, Green Bay, and Iowa, just around the Midwest. And then he was kind of a odd character, and afterward I started playing with some other people. I played with Johnny Littlejohn for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years. And he was wonderful. He's really my favorite guy that I worked for. He was really a good-looking guy. He had a nice conch, and he'd always dress for his gigs in a nice suit and tie. And he had just that great Mississippi whine in his voice, and a terrific slide guitar player, and a nice guy. He was fun. He was smart, and he was funny and sarcastic, and laughed. He was a good guy. He was a lot of fun to be around. I really enjoyed playing with Johnny, who was great. But I also played with Sam Lay for maybe 6 months or so, who used to be, he was the original drummer in the Paul Butterfield band, and he used to be Howlin' Wolf's drummer. I played with Eddie Taylor, and then I was working at Cook County Jail. Then I got, I was broke. I wasn't making much money driving a cab. I got a job. I'll leave that story for the book. But I got a job at Cook County Jail.
Okay.
And
on the inside or the outside? We'll leave that for the book. We'll leave that for the book.
Yeah, it's a little of both. But I got a job.
Did you look good in stripes? Or?
No. I got a job at Cook County Jail. I was working at Cook County Jail when Muddy hired me.
Nice.
And obviously that was the big difference, because everything, like I say, everything in my life led up to getting that gig, and everything that came later flowed out of it.
Right. Now, you met Muddy when? These years we're talking about what, 50s, 60s?
No, early 70s.
Early 70s, okay. Because somewhere along the line I was going to ask you with, with the Chicago blues, and I've talked to other musicians, I've had other people on the show in the past who was talking about, the segregation issues. I'm sure that you played with a lot of, African-American musicians. You're the white guy. Did you run into any of that racism and any of that stuff with clubs where, they'd let you in one door and these other guys had to go in the back door?
No,
I've talked to so many musicians who told stories like that back in the day.
No, I never had any trouble. I never had any trouble with musicians, and I never had any trouble in the clubs. For one thing, people wanted to protect their liquor license, so,
Yeah.
you know, they weren't eager to have trouble in their clubs. The thing you had to watch out for was the street, you
Really?
know,
Okay.
because that could be dangerous. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
gangbangers and people
Yeah,
who look
yeah.
for an easy mark to rob,
Right.
but nothing in the clubs.
Cool. Talk about Muddy. You hit Muddy. How did that happen? There's a
Well-
lot of deviousness here. You know, tell the parts that are you know.
Well, it's a wonderful story,
Go for it.
really. But I was really good friends with Paul Osher,
Polish, sure.
who played harp for Muddy
Yep.
before I did, and when I met Paul, when I first met Muddy and Paul, Paul was in his band, and Paul was living in the basement of his house, and I'd cruise down there and hang out, and sometimes we'd go upstairs to Muddy's, and if he was in a good mood, he might invite us to stick around and watch a ball game on TV and give us some champagne and all that.
How often was he in a good mood?
Oh, most of the
Most
time.
of the time,
Muddy was a
okay,
good
all right.
guy, man.
Okay,
Muddy
all right.
was a good guy.
Good. Okay.
I loved Muddy. He gave me a life, you know. But Paul had left the band. I think came in after him, maybe Carrie Bell or something, and then because in the meantime I was playing with Johnny Young and Little John and these other people, and then he had Mojo Buford, and then in 1974 I was working at the jail, and Johnny Young died, and there was going to be a benefit for his family or whatever at a club on the north side, and so after work at the jail, I knew there was going to be this thing, so I put a couple of harps in my pocket before I went to work. After I got off of work, I grabbed some dinner and I went down to this club because I figured I'd play, you know, at the benefit with whoever was there. I knew most of the guys around. I had no idea that Muddy was going to be there. So when I walked into the club, it was packed wall to wall. And I really didn't want to deal with the crowd. I really thought about turning around and just leaving.
Right.
But I glanced toward the stage, and I saw Muddy sitting at a table near the stage, and he's looking right here.
Nice.
And we lock eyes, and he goes like this.
How long did it take you to get there?
Well, that's a royal summons, so I forgot about leaving, and I
Right.
elbowed my way through the crowd
Yep.
to get to his table. And he asked me if I'd play his set with him. I said, yeah, I'd be honored, absolutely, you know. So when his turn came to play, I got up there with his band because his band was there, but I didn't see Mojo Buford. I didn't know where he was, but he wasn't there. Maybe that's why Muddy was asking me to play. He knew I could play, so I got up there and played the set. And when it was done, I came off the bandstand. He said, "You play that shit right, boy." and I thanked him for letting me play. And I left. And when I left the club, I came out and it was raining, and there was a little awning there. So I figured I'd stand under the awning to let the rain let up. And also, I knew that Muddy would be coming out. Because once he was done, he wasn't going to hang around. So sure enough, a couple of minutes later, he comes out with his manager. And sometimes I get choked up when I tell this.
Go for it.
Anyway, I thanked him again for letting me play with him. And he says to me, "Can you travel?" I just said, "Muddy, anywhere in this world you want me to be, you just tell me and I'll be there." And he says, "You're going to hear from me." So
it began.
you know, I go home, I'm, you know, high on the thought of getting the gig and stuff. But I had other things going on. I was at the time I was trying to get my own band together, so after a couple of days I stopped, I took the needle out of my arm, and I came home from work, I'll never forget, it was a Friday, I came home from work at the jail, and I sat down to eat a takeout dinner, and the phone rings, and I answered, the guy asked for Jerry, and I said, "This is Jerry," and he says, "This is Scott Cameron, Muddy Waters' manager." And it's, as I wrote in the book, I said, time stopped. Because I knew there was only one possible reason this guy was calling me. And it was so huge, I couldn't stare it in the face, At any rate, he told me that I should call Muddy. He was home. I had his number. At any rate, I called Muddy. Muddy told me, "Hey, we start May 25th in Indianapolis. You might want to go down and play with the boys. They're playing on the south side this week." And I said, "Thank you," and I hung up. And I ran down the stairs, out the front door. I chugged 4 blocks up Sheridan Road to this little record store that a friend of mine owned, and I burst into the store and said, "Muddy Waters just hired me."
I'm going to do a total non sequitur here, taking it completely out of left field. I was going to save it until later, but because you got your emotion going on right now, I'm going to ask you a question I could ask you in a little while. If Muddy walked into the room right now and sat in a chair in front of you, what would you say to him right now?
I'd say, "How'd you crawl out of the grave?"
Come on, you can do better than that.
I just said, "Thank you, man." I mean, what can I say, man? Muddy Waters gave me a life, He was a great musician, obviously, and a great person. And,
Yeah, I just wanted to hit you in that moment. All right, so move on. So you get on to Muddy. You get playing, and then you start traveling around. What was that like? What was that like hitting the road? Where did you start to go, and what was it like for you when you realized that there was a bigger world out there than Chicago or the Midwest, or maybe little trips to California? What was it like when you realized there was a big world out there and you were going to be a part of it?
Well, it was a thrill to be in this band. I mean, it was a heavy band, and we'd walk into a club, and just the vibe, like, people would go, "It's the Muddy Waters band," So,
were you recognized as a part of that? I mean, did you feel that you were, that ego kind of drove in a little bit, or were you kind of shy and timid and in the background, or did you feel that ego pump?
Well, at the start, you're a little bit hesitant. I was a little bit hesitant on the bandstand. And I'll never forget, and it shows what a great band leader Muddy was and what a great person he was. There are a lot of band leaders that can be jealous of their sidemen. They're the star. They want to be the star. You just stay in your place.
Very good point.
That was not Muddy. Muddy was happy to see his sidemen shine. It just made him look good as far as he was concerned. It was a great attitude. And the first club gig that I played with Muddy was at a famous club outside of Washington, D.C. called the Cellar Door in the Georgetown section of Washington, a very posh section. And it was a very small, intimate club, pricey. And they had a small bandstand, and it's my first week with Muddy, and one night, just before I'm supposed to take a solo in the song, and I'm standing right. Muddy's here. I'm standing right next to him, and just before he puts his hand in the small of my back and starts pushing me forward, and he says, "Go get him, son."
Awesome. How'd that make you feel?
It made me feel 10 feet tall, and it freed me up a little bit too.
Yeah. Now he had some superstar. Oh, go ahead.
But in general, I tried to kind of just really stay off his voice. There were times where I would think, it's a good place for a harmonica fill, or there's that space after his vocal phrase. But he would fill on his slide a lot. So I just, to a large extent, I tried to stay in what they call the pad, just supporting it in a general sense rather than coming out punching.
Now, he had some other greats around him. He played with Pine Top Perkins, was there, wasn't he? Wasn't Pine Top
Yeah,
with him?
I played with Pine Top 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he was someone who, he's a god in his own right. And did, Muddy let him do his thing too, and
Oh, Pine Top was a big part of the show.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
had his own charisma, and he could sing, and yeah, he was a big part of it.
now, some of the places that you traveled, you went to Europe, you traveled all over the world, I would imagine, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, we played in Europe a whole bunch. We went to Japan. That was the last of it, actually.
What were those nights on the road, those days when you weren't playing or you had an extra day, what was it like hanging around with those guys, just in a social sense? Did you always stay together, cluster and do things together, or when you were out, did you split up and then focus on your playing, or were you one cohesive unit that you went here, boom?
Well, the band got along very well. It was a really good vibe in the band internally. And Pine Top would double up with Willie. They'd share a hotel room. The rest of us generally got singles. Me, Bob Margolin, Guitar Junior, and Calvin
Steady
Jones.
rolling, right?
Yeah, they have their own hotel room. But, we'd get together. Sometimes guys would cook in their room, Pine Top, he made chicken and dumplings in a
Really?
pot. We'd like to get hotels. They would like hotels that had kitchenettes.
Okay.
So if they had a stove and refrigerator so they could cook, because they like to cook. Willie made really great cornbread, And sometimes, of course, Pine Top, I tell this in the book too, if we didn't go out to eat after a gig, we'd stop at a convenience store to pick up, snacks or something to take back to the room. And Pine Top, he would get this stuff called potted meat product
Oh, jeez.
in a little tin, and he'd heat it up in the bathroom sink, running hot water over it, and it contained ground up pig snouts and just other horrible shit. And as I say, the rest of his diet was pretty much supplied by Colonel Sanders and Ronald McDonald, and Pine Top lived to be 97. So
Wow, God love
go
him.
figure that.
God love him. Now, as far as, when you're on the road, I mean, for all those years, I'm sure there was a lot of creativity going on. There were probably songs being written, tunes being written, melodies being written. Were you involved in that creative process at all? Like, did you all sit around and say, hey, let's write a song, or hey, let's...
No, there really wasn't much of that going on.
None of that?
No,
Really?
I mean
I'm
the
surprised.
stuff. No, because the stuff. First of all, Muddy was pretty well established. He wasn't going to change his spots. He was known for being Muddy Waters, and that's what he was going to be. They tried to make him some rock star when they came out with that After the Rain album and Electric Mud, and that wasn't him. So our sets tended to be kind of similar. We'd have. Play a lot of his classics, Hoochie Coochie Man,
Right.
I'm a Man, and all that stuff.
So
Now, he
if you
did
went-
have some newer tunes, Champagne and Reefer, and Deep Down in Florida was a newer one.
How long were the sets usually, when you played?
Well, it
Couple
would
of sets, 2, 3, 4 sets a night, that type of thing, or what?
It depended on the venue.
Okay, you played a nice club?
We played there's a place we used to play in Toronto called the Colonial Tavern that we used to call the Workhouse, because we did, I think 3 sets a night with 4 on Saturday and a Sunday matinee.
Wow,
So, but
3
they were
sets were what?
40
40-minute sets?
Yeah,
cool.
40
cool.
on, 20 off.
Cool. Now, when did things start shifting for you, after Muddy, you played with Muddy, how long was it?
6 years.
6 years, and then what happened after that? How'd that kind of dissolve, and you moved in other directions? Pick it up from there.
Well, there were problems with his management, and it didn't end well. But well, Bob.
Not on a personal nature, did it end well, I mean, it didn't end well personally, or as far as the band as a whole?
Well, we had problems with their management,
Okay.
and we were at loggerheads, and it didn't get resolved, and so the band abandoned ship.
The
so to
band
speak.
disbanded.
Yes, the band disbanded.
And how'd you feel about that, after having a big part of your life, with Muddy being such an influence in your life? What kind of a loss did you feel?
Well, it was a result that no one wanted. The band would have preferred to stay with Muddy, and Muddy would have preferred to keep the band.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't work out that way.
Right.
So, Guitar Junior, Luther Johnson, that is,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Bob Margolin, they split off and went their own separate ways. Myself, Willie Big Eye Smith, Calvin Jones, and Pinetop Perkins stayed together as the legendary blues band, because we had done a tour of our own. They had left us high and dry around Christmas one year, where we had no work and no income.
Wow.
So me and a guy that was traveling with us as a road manager, we put together a string of dates for the band, so the band could make some money. And we went out as the legendary blues band, because we used to be introduced many times as Muddy Waters and his legendary blues band. So I wasn't in favor of the name, but Willie liked it and said that makes us the legendary blues band. So I went along with it. That's what we called ourselves. And we went out and we did this short tour that I put together with this other guy, and it was a huge success. We packed the houses, and like I say, we couldn't command the same kind of money that
Right.
Muddy was making,
Right.
but we commanded enough that when we cut it up evenly,
Right.
we made out way better than
Yeah.
we were making with Muddy.
Now, were you piggybacking on Muddy's music, or were you doing your own music, or
Well,
different
no,
things?
we
or
played
how-
our own stuff.
You played
I
your
mean,
own
yeah.
stuff? Yeah.
But
You established your own identity.
yeah, but when we did that, that was only a stopgap measure, to get us through the dry Christmas season. But then when things started turning south business-wise, and we had some difficulty with the management, so to speak, his manager, which, all I can say about it is
That's okay.
something my father used to say. The guy was so crooked, they'd have to dig his grave with a corkscrew.
I like
So
that.
anyway,
I'm gonna use that.
so we had done this little tour while we were still with Muddy as the legendary blues band. But then when the whole thing broke up, me, Willie, Fuzz, and Pinetop stayed together as the legendary blues band and went out and stayed together and started touring that way. At first we had Duke Robillard did our first tour, and then after that we had Louis Myers for, I don't know, probably 2-3 years or something.
Where did
like
Ronnie
that.
Earl come in the picture?
That was after the legendary blues band. I stayed with them another 6 years, and in 1986, I was burned out.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I was burned out, and I didn't like the future I saw.
You stepped away for a while,
Yeah,
what did you do when you stepped away?
I was drinking too much, and and the pressure. The music business. There's a lot of pressure in the music business, and if you're trying to make your living by live performance and touring around, it's relentless. To keep the band working, it's a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
So I needed to get off it to save my health, really, at the time.
Understood, yeah.
And
Well, after you went through that, and you went through, whatever you had to go through to get yourself back on track, what was that impetus to say, okay, I've been out of the biz enough, it's time to get back on track, and I'm going to go here?
Well,
what was
first,
that impetus? Did you do it on your own, or did people drag you back in?
well, yeah. First,
Just when I thought I was out,
yeah,
they
they
dragged
keep
me back
pulling me back in. Yeah, it is like that sometimes. It's like, yeah. But at any rate, after I left the legendary blues band, I had a brief career in the advertising business. And then I decided it wasn't working out real well. So I decided to go back into music, and so I put a band of my own together. And I had Charlie Baum singing and playing guitar, and I think Bobby Del Gizzo on bass. I can't remember. I think the first band, which was the Sidewinders, there was a guy named Jack Matthews as drummer or something. And but at any rate, I went out, as the Sidewinders for a while, and then Ronnie came to me, begging me to start a band with him, and I really wasn't. I was doing okay with my own band. I didn't want to, but he kept at it. He was very persistent, and so I did that. That didn't work out.
What was the name of that band?
Ronnie Earl and the Broadcasters,
Broadcast.
Featuring Jerry Portnoy.
I was with Ronnie over the weekend, by the way. I didn't get a chance to tell him I was going to see you, but he was little weak, but he can still play.
Mm-hmm.
He can still play.
Well, yeah, he can play. So then after that, then I went back. I got Charlie Baum again, and we were out as the Streamliners, and I played a couple years touring around as the Streamliners, and then I got the call from Eric Clapton.
I was going to get to that. Now, all of this was while you were still in Chicago?
No, I moved to the East Coast in 1977.
Really? Okay. Were you here? We're East Coast meaning where?
Somerville.
Oh, so you were in Boston and Massachusetts. Yeah. Okay. Well, I thought a lot of this was still happening on Chicago. Okay. Because I know a lot of the people you were talking about were local. So go ahead, pick it up with Clapton. How'd that come about? Had you met him before, or?
Oh yeah, well yeah. We had done 2 tours when I was with Muddy. We did 2 tours with Eric.
Oh, okay.
We toured Europe in 1978, and then in 1979 we did a 47-city U.S. tour. So, and frequently at the end of Eric's shows, he'd call just Muddy and me out to do his encore with him.
Cool. Wow.
So Eric knew me, and for years they were talking about him making his real blues album, and finally he decided to do it. And I was home one night, and I got a call from Mike Kappas, who was the agent for Muddy and John Lee Hooker and the Staples Singers, and he managed Robert Cray. Anyway, he had a lot of big acts on his roster. Mm-hmm. And he called me and told me that Eric Clapton's people had been trying to get a hold of me and couldn't run me down, and they called him to see if he could find me.
Wow.
And he found me, and I called London the next day. He gave me their number.
Did you go to London? You recorded over there, or where was it recorded?
Well, first they wanted me to come over to play at the Albert Hall.
Oh, okay. Oh, just before the album. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, that was let's see, 91. There were a couple tunes recorded from that were on his 24 Nights album.
Right. But there was one. What was a big CD? There was one that that you were on there.
From the Cradle.
From the Cradle.
Yeah,
right.
that was recorded.
That's a great CD.
Yeah. I'm all over that.
Yeah, you are.
So so they called me in, I think it was November of 1990, was when I first got the call, because they wanted me to come over to play the Albert Hall in '91. Those shows were always in February and March. So I went over in February and March of '91, and that was when he did the 24 Night Stand.
Right.
There's an album called 24
I
Nights.
have that, yeah, I have.
And 6 of those nights were blues nights.
Nice.
And he put together an all-star band. That was me, Jimmy Vaughn, Robert Cray, Buddy Guy, Johnny Johnson, Albert Collins, yeah.
Did you meet any of the Stones, by the way? Because I know the Stones,
yeah,
the Stones were big influences, and Muddy was a big influence on
Oh,
the
yeah,
Stones. So
no,
you
yeah,
met the
there's
Stones?
pictures in the book.
Really?
I should
Okay.
hold up the book, you know?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
No,
We'll
we
hold
got-
up
we
that
got-
book.
You know, I have to do a little commerce here.
Oh, we're gonna get to that.
So-
We'll hold that up. That's gonna be all over the screen.
Excellent. Well, it's a fabulous read, if I say so myself.
Now, I was gonna get to that. Let's just skip ahead a little bit as far as the book goes. We'll back into whatever we need to back in, but what was the inspiration for that book? When did you wake up one morning and did you say that you wanted to write a book, or did somebody keep hounding you and say, hey, Jerry, you should write a book? What was the inspiration and the spark that said, I'm gonna do it?
Well, first of all, years ago, I wrote a little bit of the start of it.
Okay,
And, you know, I just kind of ran out of steam.
writer's
and
block, yeah.
And it just sat at my computer, you know. And long after I basically retired, I have a very good friend who wrote a classic book called Snowblind, A Brief Career in the Cocaine Trade.
Who was that?
A guy named Robert Sabag.
Okay,
And he wrote for Rolling Stone. He's
Okay.
written a number of books, a
name
terrific
rings
writer.
a bell, but,
At any rate, one day I was kind of talking to him about growing up around Maxwell Street, and I said, I wrote something about it. And so I sent it to him. I said, you know, I just showed it to him. And he just told me, he said, this is fantastic writing, and you need to get this published.
Mhm.
And that lit a fire in me that,
did the writing come natural to you? Like, you know, from your educational background maybe, or whatever? Were you
Yes.
just a good writer?
I guess.
Really? It came to you?
Yeah.
Good. I was an English professor, you know. And I'm gonna go for
I'm
I'll make sure every
perfectly
comma and every, you know.
I'm confident that you'll give me an A.
Well, if you better not have split any infinitives or,
No,
dangled
there's
any
no
participles.
dangling participles.
I am going to search for every one of those.
Yes,
I'm going to search for every one of those. So when you started writing that, so okay, you put it away, you put it on the shelf. What prompted you to come back to it? You know. And,
well, when I showed him the early chapter,
Mhm.
and he, you know, his
this
trace-
recently or what?
This was in 2021.
Okay, so you're a slow writer.
Well, I mean, I hadn't written anything in 20 years, and
I'm kidding.
then I showed him that,
Right.
and he just said, "You need to get this published." And his praise was just really
Effusive, yeah.
was the incentive, and I sat down and really pushed through the rest.
Cool.
Oddly enough, the early part of my life, growing up on Maxwell Street, running the biggest pool hall in Chicago, because I had adventures in pool halls, you know, that are in the book too, and my Army career, running around Europe, getting with money, the whole thing. I forget where I was going with it. You're gonna have to cut this because
No, we're free flowing here, man.
I just had my senior moment. I forget the point I was trying to make.
Well, about, writing the book and, what was your impetus to write that, and you just picked it up.
Oh,
and
I know
started
where I
writing
was
again,
going with
yeah?
this. Yeah, so I had no trouble writing the early part of the book. The point at which I got stuck was when I joined the Muddy Waters band.
Really?
As soon as I joined his band, I had no idea what to write.
Wow.
I just didn't
Why
know
do you
where to
think
go
that
with
was?
it.
Why do you think that was?
I just didn't know what to say about it.
There was too much to say, and you would try.
I just didn't know where to go with it. I mean,
Wow,
I told the
that's
story of joining this band and then what?
Wow.
But what happened was that I found on the internet, I found his complete career itinerary starting in 1954 and going all the way till the day he quit in 1981 or
Wow.
82.
Wow.
And so I had all his dates, so I went right down to May 25th, 1974,
Awesome.
exactly. And then I would remember these gigs. Oh, that's where this happened. I remember that. That's where this happened. Then it triggered all the anecdotes, that I could tell, and I'd weave some connective tissue together
sure.
to make the narrative flow.
Sure.
And
And you wrote this 100% by yourself? Was any ghostwriters or any, you obviously had an
Please.
editor, who, how
they
did
hardly touched it.
Really?
That's
I was gonna say, how'd the editing process go?
didn't touch it.
Well,
I mean, the
I don't
copy
be a judge
editor
of that.
cleaned it up,
Really?
but that's just how I wrote it.
Now, I don't know how many pages, you got a couple hundred pages in there. Did you cover everything you wanted to cover when you were finished, or did you say, boy, I could write part two? Do you have enough to write another book? Get everything in there that
Let's
you
see,
wanted
the X-rated version.
Well, you gotta
I
check
could
the
probably
statute,
do
you
it.
got
I
a
could
statute of
probably.
limitations to
Yeah.
make sure that's
Yeah.
not in force.
No, I think it did what I wanted it
You
to
did?
do. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm really proud of it.
Okay. As you look back, any regrets? Anything that you wish, that you're looking back and say,
People always
Yeah.
say that on your deathbed, you never regret the things you did. You only regret the things
things you
didn't
well,
do.
that was the follow-up question, is
And
that, is there anything that you didn't do or anything
I
that you
didn't
wish
miss
you
a
did?
thing.
You didn't miss a thing.
Didn't miss a thing.
Good for
I mean,
you.
I hope I got some good years left, but if I had to leave,
Mhm.
I mean, it almost seems like it happened to somebody else.
Really?
It's
Now, you-
really a dream life. I mean, first of all, I almost put this at the front of the book, but I didn't know if it was anonymous or whatever. But the little line about I was too lazy to work and too nervous to steal, so I had to become a musician.
I like that.
So I avoided punching a clock. I got to tour the world. I've been to every state in the union, all 50. Over
So you're on the lam, right? You couldn't stay still, you're on the lam?
34 foreign countries on 6 continents. I played with some of the greatest musicians in the world in the greatest venues. I mean, grateful does not begin to describe
I
the
can
way I
see that.
feel about
I
my
can see
life.
that. Anybody who you,
And
Go.
I've got 2 kids. My daughter graduated from Harvard magna cum laude. My son graduated from University of Southern California. They're both wildly successful. I got 5 grandchildren that I'm crazy
good
about.
for you, good for you.
I've led the luckiest life imaginable.
Anybody whom you did not play with or play for that you wish you could have?
One person,
Go.
Otis Spann.
Otis Spann, and why is that? What was so special about Otis?
Well, his piano playing was just the greatest, just deep and rich, and also, he used to train Muddy's harmonica players, and I missed out on that. He taught Cotton how to get in and out, how to play around Muddy's voice. He taught Paul Osher, and I missed that, so I had to kind of figure it out on my own. So
You
to
played
speak.
with James Cotton. You knew James.
Oh
You
yeah,
played
sure.
with James.
I knew James. I knew all those guys. Yeah.
Let's talk. We'll start wrapping it up pretty soon. We could talk all day. This is too nice. Let's go to modern times. You've walked through the harmonica world, the music world, from 40s into the 50s all the way through. What's your take on the evolution of music? Where it has come, and let's bring it forward over the last 10 years or so. What do you think of the evolution of music, where it is, let's say, over the last 10 years, from where it was back in the day? How the blues players compare and contrast today to what they did back in the day?
I haven't got a clue.
Oh,
I bought 25 blues records 50 years ago, and I've been listening to the same records.
So we could drop 1,000,001 names. You know, well, I'll throw something. You talked about your friend Rick Estrin, phenomenal harmonica player.
Yeah.
Let's throw Jason Ritchie into the mix.
Yeah.
You know, talk about those guys. You know, these aren't old school guys.
Well, Rick is.
Rick is. What do you think of Jason Ritchie?
He's a magician. I mean,
He's called the greatest harmonica player of our generation. Do you agree with that?
well, those kinds of titles don't really mean anything.
Right.
They're really off base. You can't compare certain people because they have completely different approaches. It's apples and oranges.
That's a great answer.
So for what he does, he's certainly probably one of the two or three best alive.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as stretching the capabilities of the instrument, being able to play across all kinds of full musical spectrum. But you have a guy like Howard Levy,
Mm-hmm.
who can play, just play anything.
Yeah. Mark Hummel.
Well, Mark's more a traditional player, so, I mean, for traditional, to me, Kim Wilson is still the gold standard,
Yeah. Well, you and Rick Estrin, I mean, I think, you slick your hair back, he slicks his hair back, you threw a little growth, you'd look like you were cut from the same cloth.
We
I
are.
remember
Rick,
the two of you down at the Marshfield
listen,
Fair a couple of years ago when you were down there with you, Jason, and Rick. I got great pictures of that. And,
Well, the phrase.
It was amazing with the three of you together. I would have loved to have been a fly on a wall listening to those conversations.
Well, the phrase "brother from another mother."
Yep.
That has never been truer
You and Rick.
of me and Rick.
No doubt.
I met Rick when he was 19 years old, and we have been like that. I mean, he's
coming back again this year, I
He's the
believe.
closest thing I have to a brother in this world.
Yeah, great guy
I love
too.
him. I love him.
Great guy.
And he's a great player, and he's a brilliant songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And you talk about some of these other guys, you mentioned a lot of the guys, like, and you get Duke Robillard, you get, all these names of people, you still stay in touch with them all around here?
Yeah, with Duke,
Ronnie, all those people, some of the local
don't.
people.
No, I stay in touch with Duke.
Yeah. Anthony Gerasi, your buddy with Gerasi, Anthony,
Not
with
really.
contact,
I mean,
no?
I know him, and if we run into each other, it's all very cordial and everything like that.
Yeah.
But he's not, I'm not particularly close with him. I'm fairly close with Duke. I mean, I don't see him all that often.
Right.
But he was the first guitar player in the legendary blues band. I've done shows with him. I was out on the West Coast with him when he was the guitar player on one of those Mark Hummel
Right.
harp blowouts,
Right.
and he's played and I never go into the studio and I always call Duke. If I have a recording thing, I call Duke because he can play anything. He's always full of ideas and enthusiasm. I
Yeah.
love Duke.
Well, if you
Great
talk
guy.
to Duke, I've been trying to get him in a chair similar to that for the last couple of months, and I sent him a message and I haven't heard back. And I don't chase people, but if you talk to him or if we see this, say, hey, this Frank guy's not a bad guy, go on his show.
Yeah, I'll put in a good word for you.
Thank you. You may have to lie, you don't have to lie. No, but anything that is either in your book or anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to talk about, anything we may have missed or anything you want to add?
Not really. I just want to hold up my book again.
Absolutely. We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. Boy, nobody likes to show off,
Well, you have to understand, this is my Maxwell Street background coming out. Where you hustle on the street.
This is going to be all over the screen. There's going to be a nice little board right there.
It really is a fabulous read.
There's going to be a nice little screen that's going to say Dancing with Muddy, Jerry Portnoy, how to get a hold of you. Your publisher's going to be there. Phone number's going to be there. There are going to be arrows. There are going to be lights. And if I can get a couple of dancing girls, I'll have them dance across the camera holding your book. But people are going to know. But I'll throw one other thing at you, and I've asked 100 people, and a couple of them are by default. Mount Rushmore, who are the 4 people you're going to put up there? Living or alive?
Are you talking just harmonica players?
Whatever, anybody, just four people you throw, 4 musicians that you would put up on your Mount Rushmore. Obviously, Muddy's one.
Well, Little Walter,
Mm-hmm.
Elmore James,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll leave the third one for debate.
Leave it for debate, okay.
The fourth one, rather.
Now, you said that you always carry your harmonica around with you. Did you have one in your pocket?
I usually have one, yes.
You
I
have
do.
one today?
Yeah, I do have one.
Okay, because there was something I remember. I got to tell a little bit of story because, as you can see, my beautiful wife, Laura Walsh, is running the camera today. And there are certain moments that you have in your life that you just don't forget, that just stand out. And one of them that I have in the music world involves you. And I told it to you before, but I'll tell it to the audience. We were down at Pete's in Quincy. You were playing down there, Ricky King Russell. Ricky was there, a few other people were there. We were sitting in the back at Pete's. My wife, myself, a couple of other people, I believe. I can't remember who they were. This goes back at least 10 years ago, if not further. And I think it was Ricky came over or someone came over and said, "Hey, Jerry, I have a harmonica for you." And you took the harmonica and you looked at it, and then you stood up, you got down on one knee, and you played a riff to my wife, Laura, for like 20 or 30 seconds. And everybody was just amazed. And I was amazed because, here's Jerry Portnoy down on his knee playing 20, 30 seconds for my beautiful wife. And that's a moment that I will always remember, and I thank you for that. I know you don't remember it.
I'm glad I did it.
You did that. You did that. And I think the last time that I had seen you really playing out, we were at our good friend Pete Moran's party.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We were at Pete Moran. We got to give a shout out to Pete.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Pete was following you. I know he's a big fan of yours. So Pete out there, and where's he, in Colorado now? He's
Somewhere
in
in
the mountains
Colorado,
of Colorado.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Pete, we're giving you a big shout out. Anybody else you want to yell at?
Not that I can think of. I don't know what your reach is, but I can't think
Well,
of
we're
anybody.
going to have a pretty good reach. At least 2 or 3 people are going to see this show.
Well, I certainly hope so. I hope they're readers.
Oh, they're going to be readers. They're going to be readers. So, if you got that harmonica in your pocket, why don't you pull that out and pretend you're in Pete's? And my wife is at the camera right over there. So pretend that you were down on one knee and you were going to play a little something to my beautiful wife. Nicely done, nicely done. And one of the things, before I close it out, is that you had said to me when we were talking on the phone, I asked you about playing something, you said, "Frank, I'm a band harmonica player. I'm not a soloist."
Yeah.
I'm not a soloist.
Well, there are different styles. I mean, really, a harmonica player should be able to play by himself.
Oh,
doesn't-
you can, I've seen you.
But it's not my thing. I was a band player. I like to have a bass line and something to play against.
Gotcha. I think there's one other shout out we can throw out there. I'll put it in your brain. Ricky King Russell.
Oh, he's wonderful.
Our good buddy Ricky.
He's very underappreciated, but I mean, I think he is appreciated, certainly on the East Coast where people know him. He's a terrific guitar player, a good singer, and versatile. Always has a great attitude.
Yep.
And he's been pretty much my right-hand guy for
I know
quite
you
a
guys
while.
played together. I remember you guys, I remember one song, and I have it because I filmed that show when we used to play at the Temple out in Stoughton, for the rabbi,
Oh, I remember that.
for
yeah.
Rabbi Che.
Yeah.
And I have one video of you and Ricky doing My Funny Valentine. And it's,
I don't think I ever played that. Maybe
Well,
Misty?
I'm sorry, there you go. It was Misty.
Yeah.
And you were back to back, and I just happened to capture that, because the video's out there, that show was out there somewhere. That, it just blew me away, how you two just played off each other. It was like, the symbiosis between the two of you was just off the chart.
Yeah,
Off the chart.
I always enjoyed playing with Rick.
Off the chart.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, this has been a personal thrill, and certainly has been a milestone. I've done over 200 shows, and I'll have to throw this one pretty close to the top.
I
And,
appreciate that.
I really appreciate you doing this today. And, one of the main reasons here is obviously because of your book. And, I'm sure it's gonna be a phenomenal read, and I can't wait to read it and fill in all the blanks of what you were talking about today.
Yeah, it's
How
it
can
really,
they get this book? Where can they get it?
at at the moment. Well, it's going to be out May 13th.
Yep.
Which when the show
That'll
airs.
coincide when this comes out,
Yeah, and it's available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, any of the online places, and it should be in bookstores after release. you
Great.
know. But they can order it at any bookstore.
You're gonna have to go out and do the tour? You're gonna be out doing the tour and
I'll
all that other
I'll
stuff?
be doing some appearances at the libraries on the Cape, and the publisher we're working on some national exposure.
Cool.
Because I wrote this book, I want to make this clear. While obviously there's all kinds of blues content in there,
Right, I'm sure.
I had a pretty interesting life outside of the blues, and that's why it's called my lucky life in and out of the blues.
Right.
And I tried to write this so it would have a appeal to a general reader, that even if they weren't blues people, if they picked it up and started reading it, the narrative would keep them going.
Right.
And that was my goal, and I think it's a good
Who
read.
came up with the title Dancing with Money?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Good. And it was approved? No quibbles with your editor?
I'll tell you, I'm really gratified. Like I said, there was almost no editorial.
Unbelievable. I've heard horror stories about writers and
Well,
what
she's-
they've had to go through.
The editor, my
Who's your
editor,
publisher? Who's your publisher and who's your editor? Give him a shout out.
Chicago Review Press. The editor was Cynthia Sherry, who's the publisher. She wanted to be the editor on it as well. And but she really didn't touch anything. I mean, after, when you reread something, you change a phrase or maybe reposition
right,
something
yeah.
like that. But it's pretty much as I wrote it,
Right.
and it's my title, and yeah, the whole thing.
Life is good.
Yeah,
But-
it's going to be a new chapter in my life, so to speak.
Well, I thank you for sharing at least this chapter with me and with the audience. And I wouldn't be able to have done this show if it wasn't for the kindness of our good friend Alan Arena
Thank
and
him.
the folks here at the Music Room in West Yarmouth. And folks, if you have not been to this venue, it is a terrific place to see music. They have great national acts, international acts. Their sound system is off the hook. Their staff here is great. It's a quaint little place in West Yarmouth. So go and check out the Music Room. And also, check out Mr. Portnoy here. There's a lot of stuff out there about you. And they can find him on Facebook. You on Instagram?
I have an account. I don't know how to use this stuff. I'm a dinosaur.
Really? Rotary phones and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, go out, go out and just put Jerry Portnoy in there. I'm sure he's going to pick it up. So I also wouldn't be able to do this show if it wasn't for the generosity of Smack TV, where this is going to be, will be filmed. I thank them for allowing me to do this for more than 200 shows. And, you know, like I say, this is going to climb right up to the top. I wouldn't be able to do it today without my beautiful wife, Laura, on the cameras. So, once again, Jerry, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, I enjoyed it.
Alan Arena in the music room, thank you very much for having me. And as always, I am Frank Walsh. Tune in and tune on.